Table has been advised that PQB 328, 339, 342, 362 will be replied by the Honorable Prime Minister, time permitting. I call Honorable Boda.
Thank you. B315, sir.
Mr. Speaker, sir, as the House is aware, the exclusive economic zone of the Republic of Mauritius covers an expanse of 2.2 million square kilometers. In addition, an extended continental shelf of around 400,000 square kilometers in the Mascarene Plateau region is jointly managed with the Republic of Seychelles. The responsibility of ensuring maritime security within our EEZ is entrusted to the Mauritius Police. Mr. Speaker, sir, I am informed by the Commissioner of Police that the National Coast Guard has 5 vessels which are equipped for the surveillance of our EEZ and for combating illegal activities at sea. Additionally, the National Coast Guard possesses 3 Dornier aircraft and 8 stations of the coastal surveillance radar system, along with other essential equipment and tools to ensure surveillance of our EEZ. Also, a new offshore patrol vessel is being procured under an Indian line of credit with a view to enhancing maritime safety and security in our territorial seas. Mr. Speaker, sir, considering the vast expanse of our EEZ and the necessity for constant surveillance, Government has established cooperation with foreign countries on maritime security as follows. 1. The Indian naval ships regularly undertake surveillance and joint patrolling of the EEZ of Mauritius with a view to providing deterrence from any piracy and illegal fishing activities in the region and assisting in outer island support. Additionally, the Indian Navy has been providing technical assistance and training to the personnel of the police department, including the NCG. 2. Government is in the process of setting up a National Maritime Information Center, the objectives of which will be to provide enhanced maritime situational awareness and exchange of actionable information with partnering nations for timely response to potential maritime security threats. 3. The Mauritius Police Force has benefited greatly from cooperation with the armed forces in the southern zone of the Indian Ocean, which is based in Saint-Denis, Réunion Island. The Mauritian side and the armed forces in the southern zone of the Indian Ocean often carry out aero-maritime cooperation actions with NCG aircraft in coordination with French patrol boats in the respective Mauritian and French aero-maritime space, with a view to identifying any vessel whose behavior is considered suspicious. 4. The United States has, under the Africa Maritime Security Initiative Fund and the Foreign Military Financing Funds, provided equipment to the NCG with a view to enhancing its maritime domain awareness capabilities and ensuring maritime safety and security. 5. The NCG has been sending ships, aircraft, and personnel for participation in Cutlass Express, which is a joint simulation exercise sponsored by US Africa Command and focusing on addressing piracy through information sharing and coordinated operations among international navies. 6. The United States authorities have been offering courses on a regular basis to the NCG personnel in international maritime law enforcement, damage control, and maritime search and rescue. 7. Government of Japan has made available a total grant of 1.5 billion Japanese yen under the Japanese Grant Aid for the Economic and Social Development Program to the Government of Mauritius to update the coastal surveillance radar system of the National Coast Guard. 8. the government of Japan has also, under the Economic and Social Development Program, extended a grant of 300 million Japanese yen to Mauritius for the procurement of maritime security materials. 2 high-speed boats were handed over to the NCG on 20th of April 2023, and 4 patrol speedboats on 23rd November 2023 to enhance the capabilities of the National Coast Guard. 9. Mauritius has, on 29th of March 2023, signed a Memorandum of Understanding with Seychelles to collaborate and enhance cooperation to jointly undertake monitoring and maritime surveillance activities in the joint management area of the Mascarene Plateau region. Mr. Speaker, sir, I am also informed by the Ministry of Blue Economy, Marine Resources, Fisheries and Shipping that Mauritius is pursuing the implementation of the EcoFish program funded by the EU entitled Strengthen Capacity to Prevent, Deter and Eliminate Illegal, Unreported and Unregulated Fishing in the Indian Ocean region through improved regional coordination mechanisms. Mr. Speaker, sir, in regard to maritime surveillance operations from the island of Agaliga, as I have stated previously on several occasions in this House, the main objectives of the infrastructural development projects in Agaliga are to improve sea and air connectivity in Agaliga and also to further protect and reinforce our maritime security needs precisely through the surveillance and monitoring of our vast EEZ and the joint management area. Mr. Speaker, sir, as the House is aware, the Agaliga projects, which are being entirely financed by the Government of India, involve mainly the construction of a new airstrip and a new jetty. The contract for the execution of these 2 projects was awarded to Afcons Limited by the Government of India. Mr. Speaker, sir, I am informed that civil works for both the new airstrip and the new jetty have already been completed, and as the House is also aware, these 2 facilities have already been inaugurated on 29th February last and are operational as at date. The works on associated infrastructure such as air traffic control tower, firefighting services, passenger terminal building, aircraft hangar, and electrical station have also been completed, except for certain peripheral works like navigation and meteorological equipment, which are expected to be completed by December this year. Mr. Speaker, sir, these 2 projects being ready for operations, the experts from the Government of India are currently checking the inventory and attending to minor snags. The final taking over of the facilities will be effected upon the expiry of the defects liability period. Mr. Speaker, sir, in accordance with the agreement signed between the Government of Mauritius and the Government of India, title to all the immovable property being constructed in Agaliga by the Government of India will remain with the Government of Mauritius. These facilities will be eventually vested in our police department. However, the Government of India will assist the Government of Mauritius in the operation and maintenance of the facilities. Mr. Speaker, sir, in regard to Part A of the question, as I have already stated in the House previously, a committee at the level of my office, comprising representatives of all ministries and departments concerned, is currently looking into all the aspects of the operationalization of the new facilities with a view to meeting the objectives of the Agaliga infrastructural development projects, including surveillance operations and especially the improvement of the quality of life of the Agaligans. It is therefore premature for me to state at this stage all the logistics that will be involved with respect to maritime surveillance operations. Mr. Speaker, sir, in regard to Part B of the question, as I stated earlier, the facilities, that is the new airstrip and the new jetty, will be vested in the police department and all surveillance operations from Agaliga will therefore be coordinated by the NCG under the general command and supervision of the Commissioner of Police. Mr. Speaker, sir, as I stated earlier, the relevant Mauritian authorities have been maintaining a maritime surveillance system under the command of the Commissioner of Police, with the collaboration and assistance of friendly countries under different agreements and arrangements in order to ensure maritime safety and security in our territorial seas. However, in view of the increasing risks and threats in the region due to various factors such as increase in maritime traffic, suspected illegal activities in our territorial seas, as well as an upsurge in piracy attacks and drug trafficking along the Western Indian Ocean region, there was a need to reinforce our maritime surveillance capabilities for greater effectiveness. It is in response to these increasing risks and threats, amongst others, that the government sought the assistance of the Government of India for the implementation of the Agaliga infrastructural development projects. The realization of these projects will significantly enhance our surveillance capacity and capabilities and contribute to ensure maritime safety and security in our EEZ, which is so vital for our economic development. Thank you.
Thank you. I thank the Honorable Prime Minister for his answer. We'll agree that with all the agreements that with different countries in the region and with the facilities in Agaliga, the surveillance can be more sophisticated, namely with the maritime patrol aircrafts of the Government of India. My question is what will be the cost of this increased sophisticated surveillance, and whether we have a cost-sharing mechanism with the Government of India for the operance of this more sophisticated surveillance of our exclusive zone.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I have said in my answer that at this stage, it is premature for me to be able to give further details on how surveillance would be carried out, and therefore, very difficult for me to say what will be the cost implication.
Whether there is a cost-sharing mechanism between India and Mauritius as regards to this more sophisticated surveillance.
Well, there are certain costs that will be at the expense of India, and there will be certain costs, of course, that Mauritius will incur, because in terms of personnel that will be deployed there, it will be at some cost to government, and there is going to be also personnel from India that will be based there.
Please.
Speaker, sir. The Prime Minister mentioned that there are other surveillance exercises being carried out in the Indian Ocean, namely by the US and the UK, and the Force Navale de l'Océan Indien from Reunion Island. May I ask the Honourable Prime Minister, how is the coordination being done, whether we can have a better coordination with joint exercises in our exclusive zone for better effectiveness to provide security and fight crime, with having all these, for coordinating all these operations and maneuvers for a better effectiveness of surveillance?
Well, this needs a specific, a question has to be put so that I can then get all information with regard to all surveillance exercises that is being carried out, because the Honourable Member asked for Agaliga. Now, I need notice of that question.
So you need to come with a better question.
Precise.
You have a supplementary, please?
The Prime Minister mentioned the National Centre for Command, for the command of the operation. So may I ask the Honourable Prime Minister whether all the reports of surveillance exercises in our region are handled by this national command?
Well, it is within the purview of the Commissioner of Police. As I said, the police force is fully involved, and I have cited numerous instances where there are operations that are carried out with a number of countries which I have cited also, So it is obviously under either the command of the Commissioner of Police or there is going to be a joint command also.
Sufficiently conversed. We move to the next question. Honorable Itu.
B316, Speaker, sir. Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I am informed by the Commissioner of Police that on Wednesday, 23rd of July 2008, a team of ADSU officers proceeded to Sasiusaga Ramgulam International Airport following credible information to the effect that Mrs. MCL was arriving from France and was suspected to be carrying a large quantity of dangerous drugs. On her arrival at 5:10 hours in the morning, Mrs. MCL was identified by police and the latter started a covert surveillance operation of her movements. Following completion of immigration formalities and recovery of her luggage, she proceeded to the parking area of the airport. There she met with a certain Mr. ACM, age 41. At 5:50 hours, Mrs. MCL was still in conversation with Mr. ACM in the parking area and her luggage was on the trolley. Personnel of ADSU approached them and presented themselves. When they were informed of police suspicion, Mrs. MCL admitted that her suitcase contained Subutex tablets named for one Mr. SC. Whilst Mr. ACM was still with the police at Sasiusaga Ramgulam International Airport parking area, Mrs. MCL was brought to the airport terminal. With the assistance of customs officers, the luggage of Mrs. MCL was scanned and it revealed the presence of suspicious parcels. The luggage was then opened in her presence and a considerable number of blister packs labeled Subutex concealed in 2 gift boxes were found. A controlled delivery exercise was initiated. Mrs. MCL informed that she had to proceed to Port Louis and that she was awaiting a call for the delivery of Subutex. Mr. ACM was taken by police to Planway at ADSU office for inquiry. On the other hand, for the controlled delivery exercise, Mrs. MCL, accompanied by 1 customs officer and 2 police officers, took the private car initially driven by Mr. ACM. On their way to Port Louis, police allowed Mrs. MCL to use her mobile phone in their presence to communicate with Mr. SC. The latter informed her that someone would come to Jumbo parking area Richter to collect the drugs. The ADSU team involved in the controlled delivery reached Jumbo Richter at 7:20 hours. Mrs. MCL was left alone at the steering wheel of the car and the gift boxes containing the drugs were placed on the front passenger seat. Thereafter, at 7:25 hours, a certain Mr. BGRJ called at Jumbo Richter in a private van. He approached Mrs. MCL to take delivery of the drugs. Whilst Mr. BGRJ was taking over the Subutex from Mrs. MCL, police arrested and cautioned him. Mr. BGRJ stated that Mr. SC had instructed him to take delivery of the drugs. Both Mrs. MCL and Mr. BGRJ were brought to Planway ADSU office for inquiry. They were subsequently detained in police cell. The 2 private vehicles and the drugs were secured as exhibits. The gift boxes were found to contain 10,640 and 11,115 Subutex 8 mg tablets respectively in the original blister packs. The street value of the 21,755 tablets was estimated to be around 22 million rupees, and we are talking at that time in 2008. After verification, it came to light that Mrs. MCL had left her car with Mr. ACM prior to leaving the country on 20th July 2008, with instruction to pick her up on her return to Mauritius on 23rd July 2008. Moreover, Mrs. MCL had, at the time of her arrest at the airport, informed the police that Mr. ACM had no knowledge of the drug transaction. On the same day, the dwelling of Mr. ACM was searched and no incriminating article was found. He was allowed to go after inquiry. Mr. Speaker, sir, on 24th July 2008, a provisional charge of unlawful possession of dangerous drugs, that is Subutex, was lodged against the suspects. On 4th of August 2008, Mr. SC, accompanied by his counsel, surrendered himself to the police. He admitted that he was acquainted with both Mrs. MCL and Mr. BGRJ, but denied all the allegations made by Mrs. MCL against him. He further stated that he would say everything in court. He was arrested and a provisional charge of unlawful possession of dangerous drug was lodged against him. He was detained in police cell, and on 18th of August 2008, he was remanded to jail. Mr. Speaker, sir, during the course of the investigation, Mrs. MCL revealed to police that a certain Mr. PCSV introduced her to Mr. SC and also proposed her to act as courier to transport Subutex tablets from France to Mauritius. On 21st of October 2008, Mr. PCSV was arrested and a provisional charge of unlawful possession of dangerous drugs was lodged against him on the same day. He denied all the allegations leveled against him by Mrs. MCL. He was remanded to jail on 12th of November 2008 and bailed out on 24th November 2008. On 9th of December 2009, Mrs. MCL was sentenced to 40 months imprisonment and to pay 500 rupees as cost. Mr. BGRJ was sentenced to 44 months imprisonment and to pay 500 rupees as cost. They both appealed against the judgment on the same day and were remanded to jail pending the outcome of the appeal. Mr. Speaker, sir, on 14th of June 2010, the Supreme Court dismissed both the appeals with costs. On 23rd of June 2010, Mrs. MCL and Mr. BGRJ were remanded to jail to serve their sentence. Subsequent to a petition made by Mrs. MCL to the Commission on the Prerogative of Mercy on 21st September 2011, the then President of the Republic of Mauritius had reduced the sentence of imprisonment from 40 to 34 months. On 22nd of April 2013, Mrs. MCL was released from jail. Mr. Speaker, sir, I am also informed that Mrs. MCL was prosecuted for money laundering on 14 counts and was sentenced to undergo 12 months imprisonment. She appealed against the judgment before the Supreme Court. Her appeal was dismissed and she was remanded to jail on 14th of February 2024. I am also informed by the Commissioner of Police that on 3rd November 2009, a formal charge of conspiracy to import Subutex was lodged against Mr. SC and Mr. PCSV before the Intermediate Court. On 10th of February 2010, the case was dismissed as the main witness for the prosecution, namely Mrs. MCL, refused to answer to the questions asked by the prosecution. She was consequently fined 2,000 rupees for contempt of court. Mr. Speaker, sir, in regard to Part A of the question, I am informed by the Commissioner of Police that since 2005 to 2008, Mrs. MCL undertook 17 overseas trips. Details pertaining thereto are as follows. In the year 2006, she effected 1 trip to France and 3 trips to Réunion Island. In the year 2007, she effected 2 trips to France and 5 trips to Réunion Island. And in the year 2008, she effected 4 trips to France and 2 trips to Réunion Island. Mr. Speaker, sir, I am informed that Mrs. MCL was in regular contact with Honorable Richard Duval when he was Parliamentary Private Secretary during the year 2008. They had traveled on 20th of July 2008 on the same flight. Mr. Richard Duval proceeded to Zurich via Paris, while Mrs. MCL traveled directly to Paris. Mrs. MCL returned on 23rd of July 2008, whereas Mr. Richard Duval returned 3 days later, that is on 26th of July 2008. Mr. Richard Duval often received Mrs. MCL and Mr. ACM at his office. Moreover, the latter was found by his side whenever he received his constituents at Mayberg Citizen Advice Bureau. I am also informed that Mr. Richard Duval had even intervened for VIP facilities in favor of Mrs. MCL. Moreover, on 2 occasions, she was guest of Mr. Richard Duval at the National Assembly. I am further informed that Mr. Richard Duval asked 500,000 rupees from her to pay his shares to a horse racing stable. And as she was out of funds, Mr. Richard Duval made necessary arrangements with the Development Bank of Mauritius for her to contract a loan of 700,000 rupees, which was approved and disbursed within 1 week. Out of the 700,000 rupees, an amount of 500,000 rupees was remitted over the counter to Mr. ACM on behalf of, on account, I would say, of Mr. Richard Duval. Thank you.
Thank you, Speaker, sir. Can Honorable Prime Minister inform the House whether there was any relationship between Mr. ACM and the former PPS, Richard Duval, and whether there was any arrest made for a drug case? Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I am informed that Mrs. MCL stated to the police that Mr. ACM was, and I quote, "l'IMP, l'homme à tout faire de Richard Duval," unquote. I am also informed that former PPS Richard Duval often met Mr. ACM in the company of Mrs. CL at his office. Moreover, Mr. ACM was regularly found by the side of Honorable Richard Duval whenever the latter received his constituents, as I said earlier, at the Mayberg Citizen Advice Bureau. I am further informed that Mr. ACM was sentenced in 2014 on 3 counts: drug dealing and cultivation of cannabis, drug dealing and possession of cannabis seeds for the purpose of cultivation, and smoking cannabis. I am further informed that Mr. ACM was arrested in 2017 and charged for drug dealing with aggravating circumstances. Police secured 658 plants of cannabis in a chassé at Marovakwa, the street value of which was estimated at nearly 2 million rupees. After completion of the inquiry, the case file was forwarded on 1st of December 2022 to the office of the DPP for advice, and it's good to know that counsel for Mr. ACM in this case was Mr. Shakil Mohammed.
Thank you, Speaker. Sir, I have one last question. Can Honorable Prime Minister inform the House whether during the police investigation, phone conversation of Mrs. CL was probed and whether incriminating element was found? Thank you.
Well, Mr. Speaker, sir, I am informed that after the arrest of Mrs. CL on 23rd July 2008, it's good to remember the date, the latter was in possession of a mobile phone Same was secured, and upon downloading of the phone's SIM card, it was found that the phone book contained mobile phone numbers owned by Mr. DMB, the constituency clerk of the then PPS Richard Duval, and that of Honorable Richard Duval himself. It was established that Mr. DMB called Mrs. CL on 20th of July 2008 at 7:37 in the morning, 7:50 in the morning, 8:03 hours in the morning. Mrs. CL had called the constituency clerk of Honorable Richard Duval on 23rd July 2008 upon her arrival at 5:27 hours, 5:40 hours, 5:48 hours, 11:32 hours, and 12:03 hours. The phone book also revealed that Mrs. CL called Honorable Richard Duval on 19th of July 2008 at 19:06 hours and on 20th of July 2008 at 8:26 hours.
Time over. The table has been advised that PQB 323 has been withdrawn. Honorable Lomia.
B324. Mr. Speaker, sir, Leptospirosis is a zoonotic disease, that is, one which is spread between people and animals, with its main reservoirs primarily being rats, but also certain livestock, such as cattle and goats, and certain domestic animals, including dogs. These animals excrete a pathogenic bacterium, Leptospira. In their urine, human contamination occurs through mucous membranes or through damaged skin by direct contact with the urine of infected animals or through contact with a humid environment contaminated primarily by rat urine. Leptospirosis is a globally distributed disease, with its incidence being 50 to 100 times higher in tropical regions. The seasonality of the disease is very pronounced, with a peak during the rainy season. Indeed, the heat and humidity increase the lifespan of the bacteria in the ambient environment. Mr. Speaker, sir, with climate change, cyclones and heavy rains have been much more frequent this year. The accumulation of rain has flooded the underground tunnels, causing rats to emerge to the surface. Furthermore, many fruits have fallen, meaning that rats have an ample food available, leading to increased reproduction. Females can have offspring as early as 3 months old. Litters typically range from 8 to 14 offspring, and a female can have up to 8 litters in a year. More rats, therefore, mean more opportunities for mating, and thus we have a continually rapid multiplication of the rat population. This situation has affected both Mauritius and Réunion Islands. In the sister island, the epidemic started earlier and is much more significant this year than the previous years. In the first 4 months of the year 2024, the number of leptospirosis cases exceeds the annual rate ever recorded in previous years. 169 cases with 3 deaths in 2022, 171 in 2023, and compared to 204 cases from January to late April 2024. In Réunion Island, several schools have had to close their doors due to rat infestations. In Mauritius, we have recorded a total of 40 cases. In 2023, we had a total of 37 cases of leptospirosis, and in 2024, up to date, we have recorded a total of 28 positive cases of leptospirosis. Mr. Speaker, sir, leptospirosis can present a wide range of symptoms, including fever, rigors, myalgias, headache, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, non-productive cough, arthralgia, bone pain, sore throat, abdominal pain, and rash, some of which may be mistaken for other diseases. Diagnosis is made based on a clinical assessment and confirmed by a positive PCR of blood or by positive serologic testing. All infected patients are admitted promptly to a public or private health institutions and are administered treatment according to the symptoms and severity of their respective cases. Without appropriate or timely treatment, leptospirosis can lead to kidney damage, meningitis, liver failure, respiratory distress, and death. Mr. Speaker, sir, with regard to the question, I'm informed that there is a rodent control unit which is under the purview of the Public Health and Food Safety Department of my ministry, and which is responsible for rodent control program for all public health institutions, such as the hospitals, mediclinics, area health centers, community health centers, and other departments of my ministry. The rodent control activities include baiting with rodenticide outside the building, placing of rat glue inside premises, and collection and disposal of dead rats by incineration or burial. The same activities are carried out at point of entries like port and airport. Moreover, there are other specific rodent control activities which are carried out as such: deratting of vessels at the port and placing rat traps in port areas and sending samples to the Central Health Laboratory or the Vector Biology and Control Division for testing. In addition, Public Health and Food Safety Inspectorate carries out regular inspection of food operators, and both public or private institutions under the Public Health Act to check for compliance with Food Act and food regulation, which includes but is not limited to rat infestation. In case of rat infestation, a prohibition order of notice prior to closing order is issued under the Food Act. Mr. Speaker, sir, I'm also informed that my ministry is not responsible for rodent control activities for bus terminals and food outlets in shopping malls. Pest and rodent control activities are also undertaken by various private service providers. However, my ministry has, through the multi-sector stakeholders meeting on dengue, broached on the ministry's concern on leptospirosis, and an official communication has been issued to relevant ministries with regard to precautionary measures to be taken. Mr. Speaker, sir, allow me to take this opportunity to remind the population that they can significantly reduce the risk of having rats at home by taking the following precautions: regularly maintaining their yards, that is, getting rid of all clutter or waste conducive to rat proliferation, collecting and disposing of their waste regularly in appropriate channels to avoid attracting rats, securely closing their bins, and eliminating all sources of food for rodents, including pet food leftovers. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Our fatality rate so far seems to be pretty high, ranging in the figures of 10 to 12%, as said by yourself recently in a public comment during the Nurses International Day. Can I ask, which is well above what WHO consider acceptable, can I ask the Honourable Minister what specific measures have been taken by his ministry, both at the level of therapeutics and detection control, to avoid that we have such a high surge of fatalities in the event that the cases of leptospirosis keep increasing in the country, despite the good intentions of the Ministry of Health?
Mr. Speaker, sir, at this point of time, because there are many rats and because these rats have invaded different regions, so the ministry has already given notice to all the other departments where the there is the potential, that is, there is a possibilities of having rat infestations. And in terms of the management of leptospirosis in the hospital, there are clear clinical guidelines on clinical management on leptospirosis already been communicated to all officers, to all health officers working in the different regions. And at the same time, we have to also see that the cases of death due to leptospirosis is also due to the vulnerability of patients suffering from chronic diseases and CD diseases. So that's make patients more vulnerable, and that's why we are having death in, due to leptospirosis in Mauritius. So at the same time, we have to consider the diagnosis side, where it is being done at all levels in all the regions, and especially has been taken note that diagnosis is confirmed through specific text that is available in all other public health institutions.
Leopold.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can the Honourable Minister inform the House whether his ministry considers leptospirosis as a notifiable disease?
Mr. Speaker, sir. Leptospirosis is a notifiable disease under the Public Health Act.
Next question.
B3 to 5.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I would like first of all to wish good luck to our para-athletes who will be participating in the forthcoming Para-Athletics World Championships in Japan. With your permission, Mr. Speaker, sir, I will now table the composition of the delegation. Thank you.
Yes, please.
Yes. Can I ask the Honourable Minister whether Rodriguez athlete form part of his delegation?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, sir. We have 2 athletes from Rodriguez and 1 coach. So, Brigitte Laclaire, Eddie Cabdo, and the coach is Mr. Fabrice Ramsamy.
Leopold.
May I ask the Honourable Minister whether there is an accompanying team of medical team, or whether he's made the necessary arrangement with Japanese health services should anything happen to those athletes?
Mr. Speaker, sir, in the list of the delegation, we have 1 doctor, Mr. Damien Stoic, 1 psychologist, Mr. Raman Julu, 1 massage therapist, Mrs. De Kitting, 1 fitness coach, Mr. Sassoli.
Pinava Marie.
B3 to 6.
Mr. Speaker, sir, according to the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crimes, UNODC, women represent 1/3 of drug consumers worldwide and 1/5 of the estimated number of injectable drug users. The risk of contracting HIV, hepatitis C, and other blood-borne diseases are higher among women than men. My ministry has taken specific measures to address the issue of women who use drugs. The methadone substitution therapy program, which is fundamental harm reduction strategy regarding opioid use disorder, was put in place in 2006 following recommendations from the UNODC. To date, there are 5 methadone daycare centers which are operational around the island where patients are induced on methadone. In 3 of these centers, induction is exclusively done externally, both for men and women, namely at Sainte Croix Methadone Daycare Center, Bullock's Methadone Daycare Center, and Maibo Methadone Daycare Center. In 2 centers, induction is done both externally and residentially, namely at Centre Frangipane, which is exclusively for men, and at Orchidée Center, exclusively for women. Mr. Speaker, sir, the dedicated female residential center for detoxification, residential methadone induction and rehabilitation, namely Orchidea Center, was opened in July 2022 within the premises of the Brown-Séquard Mental Health Care Center. Since its opening to date, some 327 patients have attended the center, that is 104 in 2022, 176 in 2023, and 47 from January 2024 to end of April 2024. The service is offered in full confidentiality and it's adapted to the type of primary drug of concern. All the methadone daycare centers have a trained and pluridisciplinary team comprising of a psychiatrist, medical and health officer, a specialized nurse, a psychologist, a specialized healthcare assistant, and a social worker from NGOs for a proper prise en charge of patients. After comprehensive, holistic medical and psychosocial worker, patients are induced on methadone. As at end of March 2024, 8,090 patients were registered on the methadone substitution therapy program, of which 412 were women. Moreover, as per records available from January 2023 and to April 2024, out of a total number of 2,210 patients induced on methadone, 282 were women. Mr. Speaker, sir, my ministry has also set up addiction treatment units since 2018 in the 5 regional zones, and these offer services to some 6,500 attendees annually, of which some 7%, that is around 455, are women. For 2023, there are 907 new cases, of which some 7%, that is 63, were women drug users. From January to April 2024, there are 16 new cases of women drug users. Mr. Speaker, sir, women worldwide are more vulnerable to poverty, limited access to employment, and economic dependence. Drug use increases women's vulnerability to violence and exploitation, notably due to dependencies that can be exploited. Therefore, my ministry has made it a priority to provide special care for the protection, rehabilitation, and reintegration of female drug users. In collaboration with the National Social Inclusion Foundation, the resources of the NGO Grisalit, dedicated to women for years, have been significantly strengthened by increasing the number and qualifications of its professionals in order to offer tailor-made and optimal support to drug users who have undergone withdrawal or substitution treatment within the public healthcare system. It's worth noting that even though women are numerically fewer than men among drug users, very special attention is being given to them, and as for all our patients, regardless of their pathology, they are provided with holistic, specific, patient-centered care and a comprehensive care pathway.
Merci, Monsieur le ministre. Le ministre est-il au courant qu'il y a actuellement une vidéo en circulation sur les réseaux sociaux où une femme qui se dit usagère de drogue fait un appel pressant pour être réhabilitée? Si oui, quelles ont été les mesures prises par son ministère?
Mr. Speaker, sir, no, I'm not aware of any video. I would request the honorable member to share the video with me, and obviously I will send these videos to the department, to the harm reduction unit of my ministry, so that necessary arrangement can be made to offer help to this woman.
MP team.
B327. I'm informed by the Livestock and Veterinary Division of my ministry that, as at date, 6 import permits have been issued in respect of 2 importers, namely Secovia Bellevue Limited and Ubora Ventures Limited for the import of live cattle from South Africa for the Eid al-Adha Festival 2024. As at date, 3 consignments consisting of a total of 5,346 live cattle have already reached Mauritius. As per the established veterinary protocols, the animals are currently in quarantine. In addition, an additional 1,425 heads of cattle are expected to reach Mauritius as from the 3rd week of May 2024. Mr. Speaker, sir, as regards Part B of the question, I wish to point out that my ministry is closely monitoring the situation to ensure that there is an adequate supply of live cattle for both the Eid al-Adha festival and for local consumption. According to information available at a date, which evidently is based on the projected demand and available stock and imports, no shortage of live cattle for the Eid al-Adha festival or for local consumption is foreseen. In view of the above, Mr. Speaker, sir, the Mauritius Meat Authority is not envisaging to import live cattle for the time being.
As the Honourable Minister is aware, the bulk of the cattle that is sold for slaughter during Eid al-Adha festival comes from South Africa. And earlier this month, there has been an outbreak of foot and mouth disease in South Africa, in particular in the region of the East Cape. So may I know from the Honourable Minister whether this information has been relayed to his ministry, and despite this lack of supply from South Africa, he's still confident that there will be sufficient cattle to meet the demand for the Eid al-Adha festival?
Mr. Speaker, sir, like I said in my reply, there are already in Mauritius 5,346 live cattle that are in the premises of the different importers. And also we are expecting to have 1,425 as from this month. It is indeed a case where there's been an outbreak in one particular region in South Africa where FMD has been suspected. But from the information that I have gathered is that the animals that we source from South Africa are found very far, even as far as 400 kilometers from those infected farms.
You had one clarification, eh? You asked clarification.
Yes. The Honourable Minister has mentioned that adequate supply of cattle will be made for this year. Can I ask him what measures are being taken at his ministry to ensure that the cattle is of adequate age for slaughtering for Eid al-Adha?
Well, Mr. Speaker, sir, we all know every year we take all the necessary measures to ensure that as per the specification that is required for that particular festival, we ensure that those cattle are fully satisfy those conditions. So this has always been the case, and of course this year as well, the same principle is being applied so that we, whatever cattle being imported or are being locked for this particular celebration, fulfill those conditions.
Thank you, Speaker. Can the Honourable Minister inform the House about quarantine and sanitary precaution being taken?
Well, Mr. Speaker, sir, there is already a very established sanitary protocol system that is in place. And due to the fact that, that there is this outbreak in South Africa, I have, of course, asked the Livestock and Veterinary Department to enhance the control system and to ensure that whatever cattle coming from overseas at this point in time to be completely isolated, be kept in a separate farm so that there is no risk at all of any infection, just to be doubly sure that there is no kind of risk associated with those that are infected from South Africa.
Honourable members, assessment the situation for 1.5 hours.